Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm going to share my screen. Um, See if I can do this. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about some of the research I've been doing on implementation science and psychosocial care. I'm not sure who all is on the call, so hopefully this is relevant to some of you. And please do stop me along the way. I'm not going to talk for very long, but if there are questions along the way, please don't hesitate to jump in. So perhaps some of you are familiar with implementation science, but just in case not, this is the study of basically how we get practices we know work because of research into what people actually receive for care when they come to see the doctor. Um, so we know there can be a 17-year kind of, that's the latest stat, lag between when research kind of tells us, okay, this thing works, and when we actually start to see it as part of standard practice. So the question here is, how do we make that gap between research and practice decrease? And I've been trying to work in that area around a few different populations. So in pediatric type 1 diabetes and in pediatric injury, and also in providing supports to healthcare workers. And that work kind of spawned more out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, but there are evidence-based practices for all of these groups around psychosocial care. And unfortunately, not all families or workers receive that kind of support. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how my research has progressed over time and hopefully make this even clearer about what I mean by implementation science and psychosocial care. So, and a lot of plugs for the Delaware CTR along the way here, who've been very supportive of the work I've been doing. Way back in 2017, feels like a long time ago, I got an MRDA to help me develop a K award application to try to do some of this work. And that this is what led to later funding. So so one of the first questions in this area of research is around, is there actually a research to practice gap? Has that been established yet? So for example, are there any data to suggest that evidence-based behavioral interventions are not reaching kids who have type 1 diabetes? So for those who aren't familiar, kids who have type 1 diabetes, especially adolescents, tend to really struggle to do all of the many things it takes to manage diabetes. It's really complicated. It requires constant attention and shots and changing of pump sites. So painful things. Sometimes kids feel embarrassed about them. Families can have a lot of conflict. But we have a lot of behavioral interventions that can help families kind of get through this, find a way to fit diabetes into their life a little bit easier and have less conflict. But not many families get that care. So I had a pilot project through the Delaware CTR Shovel Ready pilot grant because I had applied for a K award and didn't get it a couple times even. And this shovel ready pilot grant was really useful. I'm happy to talk more about that mechanism too. But that led me to then get a K award from the NIDDK to do the rest of this work. So I had established that families are not getting this kind of care, this evidence-based behavioral intervention. So the next questions become, well, why does that gap exist? What are the barriers and facilitators of getting this kind of intervention out to families? And once we understand that, which involved a national qualitative study of pediatric diabetes providers, both psychosocial and medical, as well as families, then we went on to develop some implementation strategies. So methods, kind of what are the things that are going to help us overcome those barriers and actually get this intervention out. And the next phase of this work is to do a pilot trial. So now we have these strategies. Let's see if they actually work. If we use them, are more families referred? Are more families scheduled and signed up and actually attend this intervention? So, so this is a bunch of the work that I've been doing. I also, in the past year, took advantage. I believe there's a call out right now too. So I was talking about other kind of pilot grant opportunities through our Reach Cobri. Um, I realized that I had not done enough to think about health equity in the work I had done so far. And so this pilot grant that I got from through the Reach Cobri, which is out of Nemours, um, really helped to try to move the needle a little bit more on that side of things. Though we unfortunately know that when we've done these efficacy trials of behavioral interventions, that we have left out some groups of families in that research. They've been kind of underrepresented in those studies. And so this pilot grant is both about trying to understand how we can do a better job of including families we have previously not included as well in this kind of research, and also to understand among those families, what do these families think about the current existing evidence-based interventions? So that's an ongoing community engaged project, which has been very interesting experience for me. My first experience having families and providers as research partners as well, guiding the research project. These are just some of the papers that have come out of this work, and I'm happy to talk more about each of these as well, but they kind of span those three populations I mentioned at the beginning. So type 1 diabetes, both kind of the model of implementation science in this world, and also our survey study on staffing and that research to practice gap. We did a retrospective chart review study here at Nemours, looking at how a screening program that we came up with for kids who'd been injured and required hospitalization, where we're screening them and their caregivers for PTSD. We evaluated how that program was working. Were we actually screening all the kids that we meant to screen, and what were kind of the downstream outcomes from that? Um, some colleagues who are in the implementation world and I developed a framework for a stepped care model for healthcare workers during the pandemic, that really drew on how implementation findings, and how to leverage those to get that kind of support out to healthcare workers. And then we recently did a scoping review looking at how one particular kind of implementation strategy can be used effectively, which is called virtual facilitation. And finally, for those who are interested in implementation science, who are interested in career development awards, here are some training opportunities to learn more about implementation science. So there's some that are local, like those through Penn. There's the the Implementation Science Institute. They might also have, I think they have a certificate program, certainly a graduate program, but this is for folks who have a full-time job otherwise, and this is kind of it's usually in June, so I'm guessing it's coming up, a 4-day training. It was virtual when I did it. Um, the IS2 is a program, unfortunately, I think their funding cycle has ended. They might be applying for additional funding, but this was a 2-year training program out of Washington University in St. Louis on implementation science. There's also some regular kind of meeting groups and other resources for implementation science through Penn and also through Washington University, particularly around diabetes. So that's kind of what I've been up to. I'm happy to talk more details about any of that, whether it's the science or the implementation science or kind of the interventions and things we know work in pediatric diabetes or injury or healthcare workers kind of stuff. So I'll stop sharing there and see what kind of chat might be helpful.